is to receive the minutes of the October 15th meeting.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Register your vote. Minutes are approved. Continuous request by staff.
We have two today. Item 8, case number 14137, applicant request a deferral to December 3rd. And item 9, case number 14060, and this is a change from your printed agenda. The applicant requests that this item be continued indefinitely. Number 9.
I would entertain a separate motion on both those requests.
I'll make a motion that we continue case number 14137 to December the 3rd.
Do I hear a second? Second. Have a motion and a second. Register your vote. The case is continued.
I'll make a motion that should we just remove that from then if it's continued indefinitely? Withdraw?
Continue indefinitely.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we continue indefinitely case number 14060.
Have a motion and a second. Register your votes. That case is continued indefinitely. Do we have any requests for continuances or withdrawals from the public? Hearing none, our next order of business is the consent docket.
We have 3 items on the consent docket today. Item 1, case 14133, located at 15708 Val Court. Item 2, case 14135 at 737 Red Vine Road. And item 3, case number 14141 at 12215 Cardinal Lane.
If there's any discussion, and as board members, we have the right to request that one of those, any of those cases be pulled off the consent docket and considered individually.
If there's no objection, I'll make a motion to approve the request for case number 14133, 14135, and 14141.
I have a motion and a second. Register your vote. Ms. Powers, the consent docket is approved. We'll call the first case.
First item for hearing is item 4, case 14136. It's a request of Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority and Moomin Investment for a variance to permit single-family home encroaching a 15-foot side building setback and encroaching a corner and a driveway site triangle, and a variance for the driveway being less than 18 feet in length, 17 feet in width, with a radius of less than 5 feet at the street return. It's located at 1401 Northeast 21st Street.
Is the applicant here? Please come forward. Give us your name and address for the record, and then go ahead and speak to your application.
The name is Cassie Poor at 317 Northwest 21st Street, and I'm here representing the Urban Renewal Authority. Urban Renewal Authority owns the lot currently, but we're under contract with Labib of Moomin Development. The application is for a variance for driveway and width and length variance of the radii of the driveway approach and the site triangle corners and intersection at the driveway, and last, the 15-foot yard side setback requirement from the corner lot. And our lot is less than the typical 60-foot current standard. It's actually less than 50-foot wide, and so that's kind of the reason for most of these variances.
Is there anyone who wants to be heard on this matter?
There's nobody signed up to speak. Is there anybody present that would like to speak on this case?
If not, I'll move approval. Do I need to move it separately for each one or just for the application?
You can move the application.
Then I would move the application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Register your vote. Ms. Powers, you are approved.
Item 5, case number 14138, request of Floor Trader for a variance to permit a freestanding accessory sign exceeding the maximum height and size requirement, located at 10601 Broadway Extension.
Good afternoon. Give us your name and address for the record and speak to your application.
Bart Brewer, 10601 Broadway Extension. We're looking to have to make some changes to this sign anyway for our color and the design of it. And our building sits so far kind of west off the property. It's harder to see the property until you're really driving by it on the highway. And the existing sign that's out there, this is the proposed sign. The existing sign is more square, and it's really hard just basically to see because of trees and just being so far off the highway behind kind of a creek. And so we're just hoping to be able to increase the pole sign to be able to see better as you're driving up and down the highway.
I cannot support this application. As it states in the staff report, the size and height of the sign that's there currently was negotiated as part of the PUD on this property. They have plenty of signage. There's a huge banner across the front of the building, or the front of the building is painted. So it's not like it's difficult to see. But beyond that, I mean, there is, pole signs are sort of a thing of the past. So, I mean, just on multiple levels, I would not be able to support this application.
Were you involved when the original PUD was done?
Personally, I was not, no.
Did you own the site when the PUD was done?
Yeah, my father was involved, and they were probably part of it. It was a smaller building that we added square footage for warehouse and retail to the back and front. And at the time, I don't exactly know how that was negotiated, but I think it's something that then, as the sign went up, we've seen between trees and just being back behind the creek that, as now it's been there for 8+ years, I think. It's just not that big and visible again when I mean, the building itself is big, I understand that, but it's more of once you get to the point of you're driving right by it, you can easily see it. But as you're traveling down the highway, it's harder to see it because we're not, there's other signs that are right on the highway that seem bigger, but they're also right on the highway as you're driving, whereas we're set very far kind of back.
Yeah, I appreciate the need for visibility, and I don't necessarily share the same sentiment as my colleague does about pole signs per se, but I do agree with her. My issue here is that this was a negotiated PUD that the Planning Commission and the City Council undertook with the landowner, of which that was just you, predecessor in interest to you, but you nonetheless. And so if getting that sign altered is your desire, I think it needs to go through that same process as opposed to coming here for a variance and having us disrupt that legislative process. So I'm not able to support the application either.
I also cannot support it for the reasons that it had already been negotiated. Also, it took me a long time to find it, and it's not because of the signage issue. My navigation system couldn't even figure out where it was. So you've got some other issues to maybe get directionally to your location, and I don't think the signage would add anything. And I agree with my colleagues regarding the fact that it had already been specifically negotiated, and this is therefore I can't support it. But I don't think that. I think maybe some advertising and some other ways to draw your business in would be a better approach, because it's not going to give you the solutions you think it is.
Sure.
And I think your sign's big enough. I mean, I really do.
And I appreciate that. And we advertise, obviously, everything. The exits are kind of right there, so we thought that might help people as they're getting to the exits know to get off right there. So
I think if it's something that you want to do, you can always take it back. I mean, that's essentially 3 right there. Sure. So I'm going to make a motion that we deny it, but I wanted to tell you that you can certainly take that up in a different manner if you think that that's a really big deal.
Sure. Okay.
So with that, I'll move for denial.
Have a motion and a second to deny the application. Register your vote. You are denied, sir.
Item 6, case 14139, request of Grubbs Consulting for a variance to the arterial sidewalk requirement at 3800 South MacArthur Boulevard.
If you would, give us your name and address for the record.
Mark Grubbs, Grubbs Consulting, 1819 South Morgan Road, on behalf of the applicant. What we're requesting is a relief from the sidewalk requirement along MacArthur. Back in 2007, the warehouse office immediately north of this, we were before this board, and we requested that. In 2007, that was approved, and we got a totally different staff report. Favorable considerations, 3 of them. I'll be happy to read them to you, and no unfavorable considerations, which they basically stated this is a heavy industrial area, pedestrian traffic is minimal. The site plan indicates that there's drainage along MacArthur that can make the sidewalk problematic, and that there's a creek on the south side of it. Well, the creek's on the north side of it this time. And in staff's opinion, the statutory standards have been adequately addressed. Those were that was the staff report in 2007, in which the property immediately north of this was approved. As you saw in your staff report, we only received 1 unfavorable consideration. I will tell you that nothing's changed in this area since 2007 to 2015 as far as the development, because my client's the one that developed all the warehouses to the north of 36th also, and there's no sidewalk there. Immediately south of this is Airport Road, which goes on and turns into Regina Avenue, and there's nothing along that. So, reason we're requesting it is it'll be a sidewalk to nowhere, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I have pictures as far as the drainage goes. As far as there's a existing bar ditch here. This is MacArthur. This is our proposed site plan, which is a relatively deep bar ditch. And then this is the property that we're currently, that's under construction. This is what my client owns. There's no sidewalk along there. And like I said, Airport Road is south of there, the overpass. So, be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, JJ. Where would the road go a sidewalk go if it were in place, and how problematic could it be?
It would run along the front of the property, but it would dead end at the interstate.
It would dead into the interstate. It wouldn't go anywhere north.
One of the things that we struggle with is when we grant a variance, like we did for the other property in 2007, that's a variance that stays. And the intent of the city's sidewalk plan is to create a contiguous and continuous sidewalk for, the use of the public. The other thing we don't know is what changes are in the decades ahead. We see this in other parts of the city where, for years and years and years, it was rural and there was a lot of drilling activity and there was nothing but a little bit of livestock. And now you've got development encroaching on those areas, and so you've got the conflict of, new residential development trying to coexist with the business, of drilling and the noise and all the other things. So it's not that we don't understand that at this time there's not maybe an appropriate, application for a sidewalk. What we struggle with, I think, is what happens in the years to come. And if we grant the variance, that variance stays. And whatever happens, to that property in the years to come, that sidewalk can't be built or doesn't have to be built.
JJ, in staff's opinion, would a sidewalk here, we've looked at similar cases, different but similar, with sidewalks that are near highways. Is there some kind of, at this particular site, in staff's opinion, is there a public safety concern of any kind?
Well, I think that's the reason that we don't require sidewalks along the interstate. We just require them along the arterial streets.
And I guess right now we're in a position where we can't condition an approval to the use or to the present use, so that we're not forever alleviating, that piece of land from the
We can't
sidewalk.
do that, JJ.
That's what we struggle with. I'm going to concur that a sidewalk doesn't make a lot of sense down there.
The developer is he does a lot of buildings in this area, and who knows it better than him? The sidewalk makes no sense. Otherwise he would build a sidewalk. So it just.
But what we think about is not today as much as what we think about what may happen that we can't anticipate in the years. This may be a business and industrial area, for 100 years. I don't know. But that's what I think about and what I struggle with.
I think that's right. And of course, the nature of a variance, one of the requirements is that the conditions be unique to the piece of property. So what's been done previously really can't serve as any kind of a precedent here. It's a shame that there's not a sidewalk on the property to the north. It would be a good start in this area if there were, and it's unfortunate that the variance was granted on that property, but I can't support a variance on this piece of property.
JJ, let me ask you a question. As far as, because it's not in this area, if this board's not going to grant a variance here, can we do a fee in lieu of or something? It just doesn't make sense at this time. And you're going to build a sidewalk that's going to sit there for decades with nothing to the north of it, because my client owns all of that to the north of it.
Right. The only time you're eligible for the fee in lieu of is if there's a known, approved, funded project to widen the street.
I drove out in the area yesterday, and I really don't see how a sidewalk would be a benefit at this particular area coming off of Airport Road. I understand the concerns and with respect to the issue of the sidewalks, but particularly at that location when you're turning off of Airport Road and doing that, I think if a sidewalk's going to go to the interstate, I don't think that's probably a very good idea either. So I would be in support of the variance.
You know, one of the things that I thought as I was looking at this piece of property was that there's a lot of vacant land out there, and that as these warehouses and other businesses develop along here, I mean, this is a little bit different from your standard industrial property in the sense that it's, you know, very nice development. It looks really good. And I would think at some point there's going to be a need for, you know, a sandwich shop or, you know, a coffee shop or some other sort of use in this area for the use and benefit of the people who are working there. And there's not going to be any way to get there if there's no sidewalk. So,
Mark, I drove that from, you know, I went to Airport Road and then went north to I-40 because I wanted to see. And you're right, there are no sidewalks north of this. The first sidewalk I saw was around Southwest 15th. There's a business on the east side of the road. But what I also saw was the entrance to a neighborhood in that same area, back on the west side, and then as you approach Interstate 40 apartments. And so I'm anticipating that at some point the complexion, like Janice is saying, there's a lot of raw land undeveloped there. And so that's my concern. And what I'm being told by council and by staff is that a variance is either granted or denied. There is no middle ground. There's no condition that we can apply so that we perhaps alleviate you from, you know, the sidewalk requirement now, but in perpetuity we do not. Is that what I'm hearing, staff and council?
So are you going to condition it on as long as it's zoned I-1, or what would be the...
I want to know what our options are because,
Can you
again,
not
our
condition
concern
it on
is...
this user?
It would have to be a very specific condition so it's clear when it's triggered.
Well, tell us what our options are then.
I don't know under what circumstances you would want for there to be a sidewalk, so it's hard to articulate a potential condition.
It's like Janice is articulating, when there begins to be some retail, when there begins to be some residential activity adjacent to or in that area.
There's no way, I mean, we can't, I'm speaking out of turn a little bit, but we can't do that from a legal standpoint. There's no way to condition another property's use on an adjoining property in that kind of a pattern. Look, I'll support the application, but I'm only doing it because the property to the north is there. This is one of the few areas that I feel like City Council and staff has given us a clear directive from an ordinance standpoint. If we were to adopt your argument politely, we would never not grant a variance. We would always grant them, and that's not the intent of why that ordinance was adopted. So I can't speak to why somebody granted it in 2007, but what I know now is that it would be really silly to have a sidewalk in between an interstate and a property that has a variance that's permanent. So for that reason, I'd support the application, and I'll make a motion that we approve it.
But I'm assuming that you would accept the argument if that business to the north or if that parcel to the north did not have the variance.
Yeah, I think there have been, and again, every case here stands on its own, which is also why to some degree that case is irrelevant from a factual standpoint in 2007. It doesn't matter what happened to any other piece of property any time, whether it was yesterday or 50 years ago. But I think the problem is that if we see some issue with public safety, we've looked at issues before where there have been drainage intrusions and we're thinking, yeah, let's build a sidewalk where people are walking in a flood. That's a real good idea. Or we looked at another case where they were walking adjoining to a highway. We agreed that created a public safety concern. But the argument that it'll be a sidewalk to nowhere is deaf to me, because that's the whole point of why we have the sidewalk plan we do and why the ordinance were adopted the way they were. So I still move to support, and I'll make a motion again that we approve the application, but it's because in this one instance, he's right. Before there was a variance granted, and now we are going to have a sidewalk to nowhere. It's in between the interstate highway, where we know we're not going to put one, and between a property that has a permanent variance. It doesn't make any sense at all to make them do it. So I'll move approval.
I second it.
I have to say, I guess, that is perhaps a backward way of looking at a variance. It's not that we're making him do it. He's here seeking to not have to comply with the ordinance.
I agree, but when something's silly, something's silly. And a variance can, in my view, to not grant a variance here doesn't make any kind of practical sense. And I think if you look at the elements of the variance, I think you can find them. They're there. So if that parcel to the north didn't have a variance, I would feel differently about this. But that's what makes this property unique, is that you've got a strip of sidewalk here that's going to be in front of, what do you got, 200 feet of frontage maybe? 250, 300 feet? I don't know.
Total.
Between you and the highway easement, but
Our frontage is between us and the highway, we're looking at about 500.
But you're going to have an easement in there where you're not putting from ODOT, I'm assuming, right?
Right.
So what would the sidewalk be if you had to put it in?
All of this is actually ODOT easement right here. So there's a lot of ODOT easement frontage that takes up this intersection. The ODOT easement actually goes to about right here, which is so.
But you'd still have to put sidewalk over that easement?
The city says it's required because it's an arterial street, even though it's ODOT easement, because ODOT easement's going to cover the intersection.
That's yet another complicating factor in my view that makes this piece of property peculiar. So,
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the application. Register your votes. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item 7, case number 14143, request of Seventh-day Adventist, Inc. for a variance to the arterial sidewalk requirement at 3300 Northeast 23rd Street.
Yes, sir. Go ahead and speak to your application and give us your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Peter Plank. I'm Pinion Construction General Contractor, and I represent Pastor Stevens Brooks, the Voice of Hope, Seventh-day Adventist Church pastor, and we're here to request a variance for the sidewalk requirement along Northeast 23rd Street. When we submitted the drawings, the permit requirements stated that a 5-foot sidewalk be installed along the east-west section of the Northeast 23rd Street. We submitted a grading plan to the board. Also, we submitted some photos. Currently, the Northeast 23rd Street, which is also a state highway, does not have concrete curb and gutter. So the water runoff from Northeast 23rd Street goes into a grading drainage ditch and runs all the way to the east of that property. Current plans from the ODOT, when we met with them, right now they don't have any plans to put curb and gutter along that Northeast 23rd Street. In fact, they've started, almost completed a repaving project all along that. So with the requirements of the sidewalk, there's really a lot of water runoff that would wash off the sidewalk. So we're asking for a variance, and also have Steve with the architect's office here for any questions.
I'm afraid I can't support this. I think it's important. I traveled along the way, and I think, number one, it's important to continue the use of the sidewalk, that area, and particularly with the use. I think it's important that it be in place, and I could not support any variance on this application.
JJ, can you help me here? This is a state highway, so it's ODOT regulated, right? So the city really wouldn't be responsible for the infrastructure. We have no, in terms of the stormwater runoff and all that, that's going to be an ODOT related project, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So, and right now, I'm sitting here looking at an aerial up and down the street, it doesn't appear that there are sidewalks anywhere in this corridor. Do we know, have there been other attempts in the past to get variances or anything in this area?
I'm not aware of any variances in this area for sidewalks. I believe there are some sidewalks up and down 23rd Street, sporadic areas in different locations.
I drove this 23rd Street from Broadway back east, and actually the business immediately to the west, a small auto shop, does have their sidewalk in place. From Broadway to I-35, there's continuous sidewalk. When you
Get to the east side of 35.
when you get to the east side, there are the remnants of an older sidewalk, but I'm going to concur with Diane and not be able to support your application. There's a bus stop right in front of your property, and it's not my opinion that that the drainage issue or the elevation issues can't be resolved. But I am going to concur with her that a sidewalk should be placed in front of your building.
I concur. I'll move for denial of the application.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to deny the application. Register your vote. Ms. Powers, you are denied, sir. Thank you.
And can I just say, at the risk of sounding, I don't know what, but I think you're going to be a great addition to the area, and I think it'll be wonderful that you have your nice sidewalk out in front. Hope it will encourage other people to do the same thing.
Thank you. If there's no other business before this board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Register your vote. We are adjourned.